Hey, this is Doepker here with Bestseller Secrets. I am joined with Niraj Kapur, who is author of the book, Everybody Works in Sales. So everybody works in sales. This is a great message for you as authors, because I believe, everyone, everyone works in sales. And then especially authors who, I've noticed a number of authors, sometimes it feels like it's, just want to do the creative work. I'm not really into the marketing and the sales side of things. And yet, when you really embrace sales and these skills, it's going to help you sell more books. And even if you never sold more books, there's a lot of other benefits to sales, which we might get into. So Niraj is a successful author, a speaker and consultant. He's managed to launch this book successfully and then turn it into use it for his ongoing business, where a lot of other income can come in. So Niraj is going to have some great tips for you in terms of how do you launch a book, what do you do once the book is launched, and then I'm sure we'll get into some of the mindset things around being in sales. So with that, welcome Niraj. How's it going?
Derek, greetings from England. It's lovely to speak to you. It's going great. Thank you.
Yeah, I'm glad to have you on. And by the way, I'm holding this book for everyone watching because Niraj sent it to me, which is a good idea if you think about it, in that, well, now we're interviewing. It's hard for me to forget about someone who has sent a book. So I talk a lot about the power of collaboration. So Niraj is someone, you're putting that into action, which is great. But before we get into some of the book sales tactics, please share with us a little bit about your background, as far back as you want to go. And then, in 5 minutes or so, kind of the journey of where you've come from, any struggles that you've gone through ultimately to get to where you are now as a successful author, speaker, and consultant.
Fantastic. Well, I spent 23 years of my life working in London for big companies working in sales. And that's what I know. I started off at the very bottom and I worked my way up fairly near the top in sales. And my career was going great. And then I joined a new company and I lost my job for the first time. It was a real shock. Most of us lost our jobs. And I went on to the next job. And after 6 weeks, I spoke back to the boss's daughter. And she fired me by email. And I was heartbroken. I mean, really heartbroken, thinking, what's going on with my life? And when you get fired by email, it's really embarrassing. She was bullying my team. I stood up for my team. I got fired by email, which is a really gutless way to behave. And so I went home and I started to write all my frustrations out on paper about what I wanted with my life and why all this had happened. And after 3 months, I had my autobiography, my entire life story. And I gave it to a professional book editor. And she told me, Niraj, I have good news and I have bad news. The good news is your autobiography is great. The bad news is you're not famous. No one's going to buy it. So that was a problem, So what happened was, I said, well, what do I do? She says, look, you've got 23 years experience in sales. You're massively into personal development, as you can see by my bookshelf there and all the audio CDs I have. And why don't you write a book about sales, teaching people about sales, but mix it with your life story and mix it with some personal development. And that's what I did. So I spent another 3 months tweaking the book, tweaking it, rewriting it. I got myself a book coach, which was the best thing I could have done. And then he made it even better. And we collaborated together and we worked on it, made it even better. And it came out in February this year. And I spent, really since January, I spent 6 weeks while I was writing the book, working on my sales plan and how I should sell the book. Because I see so many authors release books and they can't sell it, or they feel it's a bit beneath them to sell it. And it's never beneath you to sell anything that they work really, really hard on.
Yeah, a couple great points. I mean, right there, you planned ahead, right? You had the 6 weeks working on the game plan. Yeah. And like you said, I've seen that too. Some authors, they write a book and then they go, okay, I got my book done. Release it. And then, okay, now what do I do? How do I sell it? Versus, as you understand, working in sales, it's like, think with the end in mind, think about what that process is going to be. And, obviously if a book's already released, there's ways to relaunch books. And so there's always things that we can do. Ideally though, in the ideal world, there is that planning ahead. So I see that's one thing that you did really well. Another thing is you got a coach. And I'll come back to that in a second. I also want to point out that you said you had an autobiography. At first, it was in that format. And so can an unknown person write an autobiography? Sure. At that point, though, there's got to be some sort of, well, maybe it doesn't have to be, but it's going to be pretty challenging to sell that unless there's some sort of hook, and that it's like, what makes this special? And if it's just some person's autobiography like you discovered, it's about really getting on the agenda of the customer, which is a sales principle. What's in it for them? What's their benefit that they get from it? And so that, modification that you made from autobiography to something that's now oriented towards, here's information that can help you as the reader. Here's something, whether it's tactical, tangible skills in sales, whether it's a mindset or inspiration that you can overcome challenges, whatever it is, it's that getting on their agenda, which is an important principle. I'm going to come back to the book coach, because that's something that, look at the world's most successful athletes, CEOs, top performers. They all have coaches. The best in the world have coaches, and the people that want to become the best in the world have coaches. And so that's a pretty common thing. Kind of two-part question. What led you to realize that you needed a coach? And then what kind of impact and difference did a coach make for you in the writing process?
Well, all the people I have utmost admiration for, whether it's Tony Robbins, who was coached by Jim Rohn, whether it's an Oprah Winfrey, who was coached by Maya Angelou, most successful people I know have coaches. And if there's somebody you really admire and they're successful, look at what they do. So I look at the people I really admire, whether it's in the music industry like a Bruce Springsteen, or whether it's an entrepreneur like a Brendan Bouchard. What are the habits that they have? And they all work really, really hard. They're all incredibly generous. They do a lot of work for charity, which I do as well, but they all have coaches. So I guess I kind of followed them and look at what successful people do, look at their good habits and follow those good habits. And that's why I got a coach. And it cost me £2,000, which is about 3,000 American dollars, which is a lot of money, and money I didn't really have. And it's quite interesting when I speak to people who are struggling. I always ask them, do you have a coach? And the first thing they always say, Derek, is, well, when I'm famous, I'll have a coach. I'm like, no. It's like people who say, when I'm rich, I'll give money to charity. It's a wrong attitude. You got to start giving money to charity now. And if you want to be successful, you have to get a coach now. And that's a big difference. And what the coach did for me was, his name's Richard McMahon, and he gave me advice and things I would never have thought of. So the book, for example, he read the book and went, this book is fantastic. The last 20 pages are quite negative. I don't like it. You've got to change it because it's such an uplifting book. People aren't going to be that happy when they finished it. So I rewrote the last 20 pages, and it's so much better. A book coach will say, I like this. I'm not quite sure about this. Don't use that language. That doesn't sound like you. And they have all this experience. They're like a really good editor, but with a commercial hat on as well.
Yeah, and it's, you mentioned, first of all, looking at the habits of successful people. That's such a simple thing to do. And I encourage everyone listening to this, one of the simplest things is to go, what would a pro do? That's a question. What would a pro do? What would someone that I admire and look up to do? And, hire a coach is kind of a no-brainer at that point. It might go, well, maybe I'm not in that position yet. I'm not making enough money or this and that. And you made a good point. One thing I say is, coming from a fitness background, there are some things that is kind of like a person saying, I'm going to go to the gym once I'm in great shape, right? And it's like, now you go to the gym to get in great shape, or you start exercising. And so it's that mindset of, what can you invest? And so having a coach, you point out, like, those last 20 pages, if you haven't written a book, or even if you have, I've written multiple books, and I still have people look at it, and editors, and pay people to do that developmental process. And I have my coaches and people that I work with, and it's about seeing blind spots, right? And we all have these blind spots in different areas. So the thing is, I've heard is, quote, doesn't matter how hard or how far you row your boat if you're rowing in the wrong direction. So if you have those last 20 pages, but there's something off with it, you might not realize that there's something off until someone who has that experience can look at it. And, see the music background similarity there. Working with guitar players back when I taught guitar lessons, they're working really hard. Then they come into me for a lesson, and for the first time, and I remember a student, she was showing me what she had been working on. She didn't have a teacher for the last few months, and I'm like, it's really great that you're practicing. The problem is you're practicing with the wrong technique, so now it's reinforcing bad habits. But how would she know? She didn't have an outsider until that moment looking at it and pointing those things out. And just a quick question. I mean, if you're open to sharing, because I'm pretty sure I know the answer. You mentioned investing £2,000. So with the books and the opportunities that the book has opened up from the speaking and consulting or anything else like that, just have you generated that investment back at this point? Have you generated more?
Oh, yeah, definitely. It took me about 4 months, but that money's come back to me about 4 times over. And if you get a good coach, it should do that. I think also finding a good coach isn't easy. I got a bit lucky in my book career. In my personal career, I've had to spend money on quite a few coaches who, took a lot of money off me and just didn't deliver what they promised. But in terms of my book coach, I got very lucky. I took a bank loan for that, Derek. And I got a wife, I got a daughter. She went to university 2 months ago. So, taking even $3,000 doesn't sound like much. But when you got a family, it's a lot of money. And my wife didn't appreciate me telling her after I took the loan out. But the fact that I made the money back, it's okay now.
Yeah. And it could have been a lot more expensive to not have a coach, because I mean, the amount of time and money invested, and then to not realize this is some of the things that I see. And by the way, this is a principle. We're talking about coaching, and I'm a big believer in coaching, whether it's coaching, whether it's getting training, whether it's going and taking the time and energy to read books, right? I mean, that might be a slower, longer process, but the principle is getting that education, although ideally having an outsider that can actually look at what you're doing. A couple, big picture principles here is thinking about it in terms of the investment. It's not just what is this going to cost? It's what is this going to cost not to have it, which could be a lot more, and what is this going to make me when I do have it? As you said, 4 times the return. So these are some things that'll help you in your decision making, help everyone, listening, watching in your decision making. Because I know I've had to make those leaps of faith too myself, where I'm like, I don't really have just the money lying around, but do I take a loan? And I'm not here to give business advice, but a business loan is different than a loan for a TV. That might just be a liability versus investing in something that's an asset that can actually generate money, that can actually be a very intelligent decision, obviously, when you find the right person, like you mentioned. So before we get into some of the specific book marketing tactics and some of the things that you did to launch a book, that just came up for me. How did you find this coach, and how did you kind of determine if it was going to be a good fit for you?
I went to the business show in London. It's actually taking place this Wednesday. And I met him this time last year, and he was giving away a free book. Now, writers love anything free. Most people like stuff free in England. So I grabbed his book, and I read it, and I loved it. And I thought, this is a brilliant book. He had spent many years working in the Navy, and he was just a great guy. And then he worked as a firefighter, wrote a book about how to become a firefighter, and then that became quite successful. And he wrote a book about how to succeed in the Navy. And all these books, now he's got his own publishing company, and he had lots of testimonials from authors. And I met him, and despite the fact we're both middle-aged men, we're both bald as well, we both have funny accents, we got on really well with each other. And I think when you meet somebody and you connect with them, and you trust them, and they have a great book to read, and it's got testimonials inside, that makes you want to invest with them. And that made a huge difference.
Yeah, and that's a great lesson in 2 ways for the authors. As you're watching this, if you are looking for a coach, you find, they have a book. Makes sense if you're coaching people on writing. Do they do what they say that they do? In which case they're an author or writer themselves. Second thing is, do they have, it's one thing if someone can do it themselves, can they transfer it to others? And so you saw that they had the testimonials. And then the third thing is there some sort of connection? Can you relate to them? Can they speak in a way that that you get, that you understand, that you have rapport, and that ability, again, to connect and relate to them. So those are like those are three things that I was taught. And you just, it just sounds like boom, boom, boom. You went through all three of those things. And then for those of you watching this, that you're a coach yourself and you're interested, your books might be a means of getting more coaching clients or consulting clients. That's another lesson. Do you have a book? I'm sure you're watching this because you either do or want to write a book. So having that book, having those testimonials, all that can help you whenever you want to attract coaching clients. So thank you for sharing all of that. And so now we heard, kind of how you prepped for the book. You got a coach, you got training, you planned for the launch. So please share a little bit about what the actual launch process was and some of the lessons that you found that actually helped your book do as well as it's done.
Okay. Well, according to research, the best day to launch a book is a Tuesday. So I plan to launch my book on a Friday. You know how movies are released on Fridays of the weekend? And apparently Friday is one of the worst days of the week to release a book. So again, that's why having a good coach really helps you. So he said to me, do it on a Tuesday and do it on the 21st, because in England, people get paid 20th, 21st of the month, maybe 30, 31st at most. So you have that 1 week window where people actually have money, and that's when you release your book. So that was really good advice. So I contacted every single person I knew on Facebook individually, which was only about 300 people at the time. And I contacted every single person I knew on LinkedIn, which was about, maybe say 1,000 people at the time. And I contacted every single one to say, I have a book coming out. I really think you'd like it because it gives loads of value, and it also tells my life story, and there's loads of things you don't know about me. And that was it. So that way I'm reaching out to people individually. There was no group Facebooks, no group LinkedIns till launch day. It was all individual and very personal, because I work in sales and I don't do group mail shots. I contact people individually. It's incredibly time consuming, but it's very personal. And people, there's no saying people don't want to be sold to, but they want to buy. And if you're very personal in an email, people are more likely to buy from you if it's personal and it offers some value. So I would definitely say reach out to people individually first, then you can do the group emails afterwards. The second thing is I did interview with every local press, every local paper, every magazine, every website. I must have contacted about 200 people, and about 40, 45, say about 22, 23% agreed to interview me. And I think a lot of that's got to do with the fact I'm Indian. I grew up in Ireland. I have quite a fascinating story of growing up. I had an arranged marriage to a woman I met for 20 minutes. I spent years on welfare, really struggling for a long time before I even found a job. And then it took me a long time in my life to have success. I've only really had success in the last few years. I really had, before then, I was just like everybody else, struggling, working, not really knowing what I was doing, but trying to do my best, if you know what I mean.
Yeah, and that's so powerful because you brought in your personal story and your personal background. And that is what's fascinating to so many people, is like, who are you as a person? And as you said, we were talking before this, you grew up in Ireland, Indian, background, and then, your marriage, your being on welfare, all these things, the struggles, as well as just the unique characteristics of you, that makes for a story more than just, hey, I got a book. So for everyone listening to this, you all have your stories. And it doesn't matter what genre you write in. I mean, it could be a children's book, it could be a romance book, it could be a self-help book. And we all have our stories. And as you bring in your story, and you mentioned local news, I haven't done local news. It's inspired me just hearing that. What I have heard is that, in the back of my head, though, I do have an appreciation that, local news, they love the idea of a local author, right? A local author that they can interview, hear their story, and then, share about the book. I love, this is such a powerful thing, and it's so simple, right? And I'm sure many people have heard this, simple doesn't always mean easy. And simple, yet is simple in that you just reached out personally. And that's one of the things I can say is the difference that makes all the difference. I know I've gotten messages from friends inviting me to a group event on Facebook or whatever. And as soon as I see it, I might kind of be interested, but I'm a little bit like, yeah, I don't know. But if I get a personal message saying, hey, Derek, like, and it was addressed to me and they're actually thinking of me and they invite, I give it 10 times the consider. I'm like, oh, they weren't just mass sending this out to everyone. Like they actually thought of me and want me to come along. Oh, okay. Now I'm really going to take it seriously. And same thing, of course, getting pitched things. If I get emails that I'm like, this is a generic pitch, or maybe they just put in copy and pasted my name, but there's nothing that's really personal to it.
Yeah.
I don't mind getting it, but I'm 9 times out of 10 just, deleting it and going, okay, this is just a mass thing that they're sending out. Whereas if they just
Your
say
personal touch makes such a big difference. I mean, when I got in touch with you, I read one of your books, I loved it, and I put a review on Amazon. And I told you, I didn't say, Derek, I've done a review for your book. Can you interview me? I did a review for your book. I put it on Twitter, I put it on LinkedIn, and I put it on Facebook. Again, I didn't ask you for any favors. And that's how we got talking. And it was at least, I think, 2 months into that conversation, 2 months before I think you come up with the idea of interviewing me. So it was 2 months down the line of me giving you as much value as I can, promoting your work, because I really respect what you do and admire what you do. And that's the way it should be. It's about you giving value to other people first, just like sales. When I do sales in London, I don't call people up and say, here's my product. I'll call people up and say, I really liked your case study. I'd love to do business with you. Here's who I work with. Here's the value I can give to you. I'll try and meet them at a networking event. And even then, I'll talk to them about their business and what they're doing. I don't really sell anything until the last minute. And that's a really important part of sales. And it's a really important part of doing business as well.
And it works, right? I hope everyone hearing this, like, it works, right? So that personal touch. And I'm going to come back to a couple of things that you just said. Well, I'll say right now, like, yeah, it worked in the sense that you got on my radar. Now, it wasn't the first point of contact, right? If it was just one thing that you sent an email, I would have been like, okay, that's fine. I get emails all the time. There was a few multiple touch points. I'll also say I saw your blog article. If I can make a note to link to that too.
Oh, that's right. That's right. Through Nick Stevenson.
On Nick Stevenson's site. Now, this was already after you were kind of on my radar and we had a few exchanges back and forth. You were updating me on some of your successes. And then I saw that on Nick Stevenson's site. So I go, okay, so you're interested in helping other authors. I could see that was part of your part of who you are. So, over time, like you said, a couple months building that relationship, which is why, when you talk about this, it is building relationships, and why it's challenging if you go, I got a book out. Hey, will you interview me? Like, I don't know this person, whatever. Like, some people would do that. Whereas when you're thinking ahead, or when you're thinking about long-term, like you do, Niraj, because you understand sales, right? So it's that long-term thinking, and as you're here, everyone here is listening to this. It might be watching this. Part of the intention of this is not to just get the tactical tips, but to like download kind of some of the mindsets and the attitudes by example and by role model of, what is sales? How do you do sales well? And if you really do sales well and get it, I'll point out what sales is not, and then I'll point out what I believe sales can be, or what it doesn't need to be. Sales is not, hey, buy my product. Hey, so-and-so, I got a book, go buy it. And that's where some people feel icky about it. And it's like, yeah, it feels icky because A, it doesn't work. And B, it's like, it's that kind of selfish attitude that, first of all, I don't think is actually typical. Some people certainly have it, but it just doesn't even work long-term. Whereas one of the reasons why I love sales, and I imagine it's the same for you, Niraj, is that because you embody this, is this you're actually giving value. You're actually sort of gifting people. So if you're the type of person who you love giving someone a great gift and seeing them light up, and you're not giving them that gift because it's like, okay, so now what are you going to get from me? It's like you give it because it's like, how can I help? How can I
that's
help?
really, really important. Yeah.
Yeah, it's that idea.
100%. And that's a lot to do with, I think, personal development as well.
Exactly. As you do this personal development, I say
that's got a lot to do with personal development as well, because so much of what you give is about giving to other people. It's about serving others. That's what personal development is. When you serve others, you also feel really good, and it's good for your confidence. It's good for your mindset. It's good for your well-being. As an author, it's really important every day, especially when you're selling or trying to find work, that you have a positive mindset and you have a positive attitude. And I meet so many authors who are very frustrated because they've tried to contact the biggest newspaper in the country or the biggest magazines and got nowhere, and they can't understand why. And all they do is say, hey, my book's out, can you review it? And it's like, why would they? They have hundreds and thousands of authors a year and agents and managers and celebrities contacting them. You have to give value first. And the great thing about local press, and the reason I recommend everybody, is because local press care about people and they want to know about people, and everybody has a great story. Some of us have many stories, and that's what I did. Instead of writing a sales book which just had figures and stats, each chapter is an autobiography of my life, and in each chapter there's a lesson you can learn about sales that will help you sell better if you're an author, if you're a business owner, or if you're an entrepreneur. And that's really, really important. There's lessons to be learned, but people learn more by storytelling. It's 5 times more people learn through storytelling than facts and figures. And that's why the autobiography angle worked very well, Derek.
I'm glad you brought that up, because I know for some of the fiction authors that are going to be checking this out, it's like, I'm a storyteller. I'm not a salesperson. I'm like, you have one of the best skill sets for sales. Like, your storytelling is, even a book description is like a mini story, right? There's a unique angle, but it's story. And yes, there are distinctions. There's important things to understand about the sales process. In the heart of it, there is oftentimes storytelling. So with that, before we go on to, what you did after your book launch, and by the way, I love that you pointed out when you reached out to these people, you reach out personally. You also said, it's going to give value to you. So it's making it about them. And even the curiosity angle, many things you don't know about me. Now, obviously that's not going to work for a stranger, but when you're talking about people you're personally connected with, on Facebook and LinkedIn, that is an interesting angle, right? And someone, you're going to learn about, some kind of insider stuff that not a lot of people know. So that was a great approach. Anything else for the book launch that you felt, tactically, strategically helped you do as well as you did?
Strategically, one of the things I did was I looked at the people I'm connected to, and I looked at the 10 most popular people on Facebook who are just always promoting, always on social media, the most popular people I know on LinkedIn, and I sent them a free copy. But again, with a letter saying, my new book's coming out, and I really want to sell this book because it's important to me. I want to get the message out there. I want to raise the standards of sales because, as I'm sure you know, the standards of sales are not good enough. I thought it'd be nice to give you a free book. And if you like the book, only if you like it, I'd be really grateful if you just did a post on LinkedIn or a post on Facebook or an Amazon review, because that really makes a positive difference in my life. Thank you. And that's it. So it's a letter I sent to them with a free book, reaching out, saying I'd be grateful for your help because I already knew the person. You're really well connected. And only if you enjoy it, which I hope you will, feel free to just mention it once, and that's it. So it's very conversational. And I would say, again, about 35% of those people recommended my book, to say 3,000 people on Facebook, 2,000 people on LinkedIn, 5,000 people on Instagram. And it just slowly grew and grew. And a lot of people I personally messaged who didn't know about my life story would read my book and go, wow, we didn't know that about you. That's incredible. And because my journey is a roller coaster of ups and downs, and people are surprised, I think, how much failure there's been in my life, because they see my lovely home, my lovely car, my beautiful wife, my clothes, and think my life is so easy. But they don't realize how much struggle and how much failure I've had to endure to get there. And I think when you talk openly, especially as a man, about your failures and your struggles, it humanizes you. And that's really important, especially when you work in sales, because most salespeople aren't considered human. We're not. So to humanize yourself and to be open and vulnerable is so important.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the realness of it. That's where people can connect. And it's so important. I mean, even before there's a speaking coach, Pat Quinn, and he describes it like this. People need to know that you're ordinary and that you're extraordinary. You got to have both of those things. So what's that connection point? What are the struggles that humanizes you and creates connection? But then what are the things that ultimately you develop that are maybe some extraordinary skills in sales? And extraordinary not because other people can't develop it, but precisely because you go, hey, I did struggle, and if I can do it, you can do it too. If I can develop these things, then so can you. That's such a great lesson to share your story, the struggles as well, especially the struggles with the successes. You said something in there, raise the standard of sales. So you have a mission. You have something that's bigger than yourself. And that's another important messaging point, that this isn't just a book about sales. This is really a bit part of something greater, which is raising that standard. And for others who share that same sort of, they align with that mission or the values that you have, that's what, entices or enrolls people. Then you said you send them a free copy. So now we're talking about that personal touch, but you're talking about giving. You're talking about something that stands out. It's easy to potentially ignore an email, potentially easy, but I can't ignore getting something in the mail. Right? Like I can't, like it's there. It's in my face. It's so powerful. Yeah. And you mentioned, you mentioned kind of like that 20 to 30%, as we understand in sales. You can be the best salesperson. It's not 100% game. It's not even necessarily a majority game. It's sifting and sorting and finding the people who it is the right fit for, and you get a response, which is why it's sometimes funny for those who haven't learned that or don't understand that. Go, yeah, I reached out to a person. I reached out to 3 people and I didn't hear back, and then I moved on. It's like, it's more than that. It's somewhat a numbers game. It's also somewhat a strategy in who you reach out to and when. So you mentioned the local news. If you maybe try to reach out to Oprah, that might not work yet, right? Until you develop a certain level of credibility. So you started local. You kind of started, where can I get my foot in the door? And this is a great lesson for everyone listening. Where can you get your foot in the door? Who are the people that you can connect with and reach out to, who maybe are just a little bit beyond you, or they're, they have some level of success and momentum, but they're not like at that unreachable level yet. And as you get your foot in the door in one place, then another, principal, referrals. Who else do you know? What other news stations, whatever radio stations, you can get introductions and kind of build from there and expand from there. So some great lessons in there. And then I know you've had a number of things that you've been doing since the book has come out. And I imagine the book has probably helped you get some more of these. I know I've seen some consulting or some speaking engagements. So I'd love to know, what are some of the things that you've done beyond the book, and how have you used the book to as part of a bigger business?
Well, when the book came out, and I contacted a lot of big businesses in my area, say, look, I've got 23 years expertise working in London. I'm a best-selling author. I'd like to come work with your company. And they're like, no. I'm like, why? Because we don't know who you are. And so for me, that was quite a scary lesson, because I imagined my journey to success. I think we all imagine this, Derek. It's going to be like this, but it tends to go like this and like this and like this and like this. And so I was surprised that I had this best-selling book, and yet it was a struggle to find work as a coach. And, I've worked in sales 23 years. I've been a coach for 6 of those years. And I really help people do better. I help them get results. I help them grow. And sales coaching, it's not as broad as business coaching, but it's really important to people, and it's very important to businesses. And yet nobody wanted to hire me because they didn't really know me well enough, despite selling this book. And that really surprised me. So what I had to do was think, oh crap, how am I supposed to survive? What do I do? And I spoke to my inner circle of people from Tony Robbins groups and just people I know. And they said, look, you've got to get out there in the circuit and just talk. Because I love talking anyway. That's what I did. I went to every business networking event for nearly 4 months. I'm talking breakfast, I'm talking lunches, I'm talking dinners, sometimes 3 times a day. And I spoke about sales. And when you go to business events and you talk about sales, you might as well talk about insurance or being a car salesman or doing real estate. People do not want to hear from a salesperson. So the expectations are quite low. And because I spoke about sales very differently, I talked about value. I didn't talk about how to sell anything to anyone. I don't believe in that. I didn't talk about selling ice to the Eskimos. I don't teach 30 ways how to close a deal. Again, I don't believe in that. I talked about value and really unique things you can be doing that maybe you haven't thought of. And I get people thinking. And all of a sudden they look at me a bit differently, they look at me as somebody who can provide value. And then they meet me afterwards and say, so where's your book available? Then they read my book and they go, this book's really good. And then they meet me for coffee and they ask about my coaching. And a lot of people can't afford my coaching, but those that do then hire me. So there's a process of talking, getting the book, meeting for coffee, hire me as a coach. You know, there's a long process involved. But once that happened, and people started reading the book, hearing me speak, all of a sudden, after a few months, thankfully, I'm now working full-time as a full-time sales coach and speaker, which is wonderful. It's what I love doing.
That's such a great story, and again, a testament to your perseverance and to your mentality. I really admire the way that you approach all of this, and that you go, you're in it to provide value. You're willing to do what it takes. You're willing to really build those relationships. And again, you practice what you teach and what you're sharing with people, and that you go, okay, well, if you're going to sell yourself on, the coaching and consulting, you go through a similar process that you talked about before, which to kind of encapsulate some of these things, and in some in your words, some in just general terms, the relationship building, the rapport building, starts first, and that might be giving a talk and then meeting for lunch. And, all of that is rapport building, but all of that's also providing value and giving great tips to people so that they do get to know, love, and trust you. And then you're willing to go out there, like you said, and do the numbers thing, where it's like, if you're speaking at event after event, knowing that not all of them are going to pan out, but all of them do teach lessons. All of them do get you more, sharpening the axe, so to speak. So they all have value, even if they don't directly lead to a sale right away. And some of them, maybe a year later, someone you met at one of those events, there's that follow-up. You said something even about your message. And so for those of you who are speakers and you do have a message, and all authors have a message, you can get something from this. There's something really interesting for those who are in areas where there might be some skepticism or resistance. This actually can be a great thing, because what happens is you can break stereotypes and you can overcome skepticism. So someone's like, oh, it's a sales talk. That's not the thing that we want to hear about. But you come in and you go, and not necessarily literally saying this, but overall it's like, this isn't your typical sales talk. This isn't the things about how to close anyone, do anything like that. This is really about how to give value to people. And I would assume people who are in business recognize that sales is kind of essential if you're in business. So they go, okay, A, this is something I probably need to know about. And B, oh, this is done in a way that actually feels good. And this doesn't sound like, maybe some of the other sales talks or what I imagine other sales talks would be. So you've now overcome skepticism. You've broken some of the stereotypes, and that can be incredibly powerful. And you see the results. They're now going, actually, I want to learn from you. I want to hear more about your tactics. It sounds fresher. It sounds more in alignment with who I am. So I hope that everyone listening can take that away, that if you're in a market that people aren't just like dying to hear you speak about it, they're not just like craving it. It's like, that's okay. You can package it, you can angle things, and you can actually turn their skepticism around or turn their resistance into actually going, oh, this is really great. I love it. And so that it's brought up. Is there anything that you did whenever you, I don't know, from the title of your talk, or when you first, kind of that first 30 seconds of you go into one of these events and you start talking, what's that first like 30 seconds like to get people open and kind of enrolled into going, oh, actually, I want to hear from you?
Well, I've read, a lot of TED books, and I watched a lot of TED Talks to see, because I've never spoken in public like this. I've given a lot of sales presentations to boards of directors, but I've never spoken in public like this before. So I read 3 books on TED Talks, one by Chris Anderson, which is amazing. One's called Talk Like TED. I watched a lot of videos. I really practiced. Again, I got a business coach. I worked on how I spoke. These things are really important, because anytime you do anything new, you don't want to be average and you don't want to be above average. That's not good enough. And it's just about raising the standards. So you hire a coach, you read books, you watch YouTube videos, and I practiced again for about 3 weeks before I first spoke. And my first speech, I was just sweating. I was nervous. It was horrible. And I think it was around about my 8th talk that I slowly became a bit comfortable. Now I've given about in the last 9 months, I give maybe 60, 65 talks. And you still get a few butterflies. I think that's normal. That shows you care. But now I feel very confident talking. And I was at an event last month where the speaker didn't turn up for a breakfast talk. And the guy running it says, "Do you mind doing this?" I'm like, "Yeah, I'd love to." And I stood up and I spoke for half an hour for breakfast. It was just fun. And now I really enjoy it. And I always, say, okay, just so you know, I always do two things. I say, I'm going to share as much value with you as possible to help you in your business. And that's how I start my talk. People know that I'm there to help them. And the second thing I do is I go into a very quick story. So usually for 60 to 90 seconds, I'll tell a story of something I've experienced, whether it's sales or whether it's personal, because when you tell people a really good story, you kind of really grab their attention. And once you grab your attention, it's like you can talk about other stuff. The best example is, I'm sure you've seen Raiders of the Lost Ark, the first Indiana Jones movie. And the first 10 minutes are just amazing. The audience is like, can't believe it. And the next 15, 20 minutes is kind of boring, but you're paying attention because the beginning was so good. And I kind of translate that to my speech. I make sure my first 1.5 minutes is so good that if my next few minutes aren't as exciting, it's okay because they've bought into me. And that's really, really important.
It is so important. And that's a principle in any sales, any marketing, any communication for that matter, is first get their attention, right? And I just feel compelled to say something like, when we talk about these things, notice how it works on multiple levels, because we're talking about giving a talk. And some people listening to this, they go, that's directly relevant. Some people are like, well, I'm never going to go out and speak. Well, okay, what's the principle? You got to get their attention. I mean, I hope most fiction writers realize that first part of the first book description, the first headline needs to get them to read the next thing. And then they read the book description and it gets their attention, hooks them in. So they go, oh, now I want to, read the first part of the book. And right. And the whole thing, storytelling, again, as you mentioned, you get an attention grabber, you let them know that what's in it for them, addressing it to them, and then hook them in. And that first initial part. So then you can, kind of like a roller coaster. There might be some ups and downs, but you really want to start with that, that exciting part that pulls them in. And then, talking to, these are principles of influence and communication. So you can go, how would this apply to raising kids? I work with a coaching client, and sometimes we talk about things with her daughters, and it's like, the same principles. How can they drink more water, getting in that? You get their attention and you go, what's the value for them? What's the benefit? Is it going to help them, one of our daughters not get tummy aches anymore? One of our daughters help perform better in swimming? What's the value for them? So you go sales, as you say, everybody works in sales, from parents to you're at a job and you want to get a raise. How do you get the attention? How do you enroll them to see your value and the value that you're providing, and why it would be beneficial for them to give you a raise? It's in everything that we do. So I love the tactical, tangible tips. And then you go, what's the principle behind that? And how do I apply this to what I'm doing, regardless of what kind of books you're writing? And again, I just want to recap a couple important principles. You get their attention, you let them know that there's value for them, and you tell a story. Storytelling, it's like we're hardwired as human beings. We hear a story, and it's, someone's starting to tell a story, and it draws us in, it hooks us in. Really, really important for what you do. And then you also mentioned, again, getting a business coach, putting in the work, putting in, using another fitness term, putting in the reps, right? Talk after talk after talk. And I actually didn't know this until you just shared this. I thought you had been, I know you've done, like you said, sales presentations. I didn't know that kind of some of the speaking was a newer thing for you. It just seems like, oh, you're doing it. I hear, you said like you're in 60 something time. I'm like, yeah, it's like, oh, wow, this is actually a, somewhat of a newer venture. And that just goes to show that just because someone's maybe spoken to other groups before, it's a new environment or some new content, and that can be a stretch, right? Like you said, for you, it was a stretch, and yet you did it and you embraced it and you worked through it to the point where now you said, so some things come up, but I imagine it's more like excitement now, like a little bit of, I'm about to give a talk. So great lessons there. before we start to bring it to a close, any other, final tips or thoughts that you'd like to share with the authors and everyone?
Oh yeah, I've written down here, be consistent. So every day as an author, just spend half an hour to 1 hour a day selling, but make sure it's every day. Don't just do it once a week. It needs to be done on a consistent basis. One thing I also did, I wrote about 12 blogs for other bloggers. So I reached out to about 20 bloggers saying, look, I'd love to write about sales on your website, so I can talk about different kinds of sales. I can talk about being a failed rock star when I was 18. I can talk about a lot of different things. What can I talk about that would give value to your audience? And most often focused on sales. One person focused on me being a failed rock star and how that helped me in business. And that was quite a popular one, what I learned from those failures. And of course, one was Nick Stevenson, where I wrote my life story and how that helped other authors. So reaching out to people like that, because bloggers will have audiences of thousands and thousands of people. And so you write an article for free and you'll get access to thousands of people. And that's a good thing to do. A lot of people often think, how do I make money out of this? And I keep saying, no, that's the wrong attitude. How do I get exposure? How do I create value? These are the words you should be thinking of. That's very important. And I think also as an author, it's very important to have a big why. Simon Sinek's book, Start With Why, is a great book. Or even just watch a 20-minute YouTube video. It's also very good. On days where I don't want to work, which sometimes happens, on days where I'm frustrated, on days when I'm given a bad talk, I know what my why is. My why is I'll try and show you my vision board before I go. It's on the wall here. I got a family that I work for. I got so much charity work that I do. I have rock concerts I like to go to. This is why I do things every day. I give value to people, but I have a very strong why. And that's why I just get out there and work really hard. Anytime I have a failure, my why keeps me going forward.
Perfect. So a couple things I heard there again to recap. So many great lessons. Thank you again. And so consistency. Mentioned doing something every day. And I've shared this. This is what the research shows, especially for building habits. I find that not just from personal experience, but again, the research, even a small action every day helps build that habit. So especially at first, let's just say it's building a writing habit, building a sales habit, even if it's just 5 minutes a day. And even if it's not the best quality, that consistency at first is more important to ingrain this idea that this is what I do. I'm a writer, I'm an author, I'm in sales, because you're doing something every day. So if you go, I don't have 30 minutes today. Do you have 10 minutes? I don't have 10 minutes. Do you have 5 minutes? Do you have 2 minutes to send one message on LinkedIn or on Facebook, or send package up one book to send to an influencer? And if that's all you do that day, that keeps the ball rolling, that keeps that momentum rolling. So consistency. You mentioned reaching out to other, to bloggers. That's that mindset. Again, it's the idea of, who do I know? Who's already in front of an audience that I want to get in front of? Because it would take any of us a really long time to maybe build up. If you think about 10 people with an audience of 10,000, what's that, 100,000 people potentially to reach. Maybe there's some crossover between those audiences. Let's say it's 50,000. It could take you a while to reach 50,000 people on your own, but you could connect with 10 people in an afternoon, right? So that idea of reaching out to people who already have your audience, tactically a great strategy, and that you bring in your life story, interesting stories that you can then package. This is a great lesson that you can use regardless of what genre that you write in, for writing blog articles, also writing your emails. I remember there's what Brazilian Jiu-Jitsu taught me about being an author. Obviously I write for authors. Or what, being a valet parker taught me about communicating with my customers. What, myself as well as a musician, what writing music taught me about writing books, right? So it could be a direct relationship. It could be kind of an interesting angle. And now you bring in your background and your experience as a way to give you, a fresh spin on some of these ideas. And then you mentioned a big why. Your why is your motivation. So if motivation is waning, what is your why? If you're like, I'm not really feeling totally comfortable reaching out to people to sell this book. What I found is that when I had a book that I really believed in and felt like I know that this book is going to help people, and I got so clear on that, I'm like, I can't not start being like, oh my God, this is great. Your audience is going to love it. It wasn't hard. It wasn't like this weird sort of shameless self-promotion. It was like, the world needs to hear this. Like you said, like you have this mission, like let's raise the standard in sales. And so, you know, that why about the book, but the why about your family and the impact that you want to make and the things you want to do in your life. And if it's fun things, if it's meaningful things, all of that helps you. And you mentioned the visual cues, vision board. There's actually reading the book Persuasion by Cialdini. Yeah, and he talks about one of the things that they did in a company. Well, there's a number of these things, but the ideas that they came up with for people coming up with employee incentive programs, when they could see the employees walking around that they're going to be creating these incentive programs for, their ideas were better. And Cialdini, he found when he was writing at a university versus when he was writing at home, when he was in the university looking out the window, seeing all the buildings and stuff, his writing sounded very academic and like very formal. And then he'd go home and he'd write and it sounded very casual and conversational. And he didn't mean to do it. He's like, what happened? And he goes, the environment that I'm in is, unconsciously influencing what I'm producing. So that's a lesson there, not only in motivation in the vision board, but also what's your environment? Is it inspiring you? Are you seeing things that are triggering your brain to set you up for success and to be in alignment with your goals? So many nuggets of wisdom. Thank you again, Niraj. And how can people learn more about you, your work? And I'm sure a number of people are going to want to check out your book now, Everybody Works in Sales.
Of course. I mean, the best ways to contact me are everybodyworksinsales.com. You can reach out to me through email there. LinkedIn, I write lots of articles on LinkedIn on sales and business. Funnily enough, like storytelling lessons I've learned about business by attending a Jewish wedding, lessons I've learned about life as a failed rock star, lessons learned from Bruce Springsteen because he's a big hero of mine, lessons learned from Tony Robbins because I attended the Tony Robbins event this year, which was life-changing, but also just lots of articles on sales about why you need to pick up a phone, which people don't do very much, the importance of letter writing, things like that. So LinkedIn, I don't think there's many Niraj Kapurs there, so it's Nirajkapur. Everybodyworksinsales.com, and Everybody Works in Sales is only available on Amazon. And that was a decision I made because I spoke to my book coach about this. And if you imagine, there's so many platforms you can sell your book on, so many websites, so many bookshops. By only selling it through Amazon, I've been, up until August, I was consistently in the top 100. And there's pictures I've posted of me and Warren Buffett next to his book, next to Tony Robbins' book, next to Simon Sinek, next to Richard Branson for 2 weeks. Me and I think it was Losing Your Virginity, his new book, neck and neck. He was like 45, I was 47 in the charts because I only sold through Amazon. And if I'd sold through every platform, the book wouldn't have ranked so high. So that was something strategic I did. And that's why the book's only available through Amazon.
Great. Thank you again, Niraj. So again, that's everybodyworksinsales.com. You can check out the book on Amazon, check out Niraj on LinkedIn, a number of articles and things. And I can link to a couple of the things that we mentioned here on this. So great lessons. Again, I mean, there's so many valuable things regardless of what genre you're in as an author. If there's anything we talked about that was very maybe specific to one thing, I invite you to do, just like I did, go, how does this apply to me? Because again, everybody, which means you, works in sales. So these are lessons that you can apply. Even if you never sell a book, you'll find a way to apply this to, working with kids or grandkids or coworkers or in your relationships in so many places in life. Thanks again, Niraj. Wishing you all the best. Take care.
No, it's an absolute pleasure. Thanks so much, Derek.